We're going to talk more about the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza now with James Elder, a spokesperson for UNICEF, joining me now live from Cairo. James, thank you for taking the time to speak to us. You were in Gaza yourself very recently. How devastating is the situation for children at the moment?
A mass death of children being killed from the skies, and now a very real death, as you just showed there, of disease potentially killing just as many children as the bombardment has. We don't say this lightly. There's two, if you will, dangerous narratives being shared. One is that the South will not suffer the same horrors that women and children suffered in the North. I can bear witness to the fact that is not true. The intensities of bombardments, Genie, in the south are utterly overwhelming, again, with 1 million more people there, hundreds of bombardments a day. And the other one is these so-called safe zones, which are safe maybe if there's no bombs, but not safe in a legal or moral sense, which is that people would go there and have water, food, medicines, protection. They have none of those things. And so it is a perfect storm for disease. As you just showed in your program, you know, we're talking 20, 30 times already some diseases exploding, and the hospitals are war zones. So we are at a point where we're going to see the mass death of children unless we see a ceasefire very, very quickly.
James, how are the health workers dealing in these awful circumstances?
I mean, heroically can be overused, but it's nothing short. They do things called 24 hours. They'll do a 24-hour shift, get a few hours off, and do another one. They often work because of a lack of fuel. They work and they'll do surgery sometimes without light. I know there's been scenarios without anaesthetic. I've been in hospitals that are referral hospitals, that are battle zones. They are doing battleground trauma. I talk to doctors who are almost broken sitting outside because they say, well, I'm here trying to treat 50 children with the horrendous wounds of war, but I'm not with my family. What if my family get bombed now? I'm not with them. So it's nothing a doctor should have to endure, Genie. I've spoken to young people who are 1 or 2 years away becoming doctors saying, I want to save people. I don't want to be a doctor who can only bury people. You cannot overstate the merciless sense of what's happening right now to children and women in Gaza.
What did you notice with the children that you met or that your teams have met in recent days? Those who aren't injured, perhaps, what are they doing with their days? Is there any kind of school or anything in session to give them some semblance of normal in the midst of all of this chaos?
Absolutely none. I don't think I've ever said that about a place. There'll be a child-friendly space. UNICEF will get something there. We are struggling to get meaningful aid to people, struggling to get a few litres of water to people. 1,000 people who've been asked to move somewhere else will have no toilet, no sanitation. Picture that. 1,000, 10,000 people waking up without any toilet anywhere. Again, we speak to disease. So there's nowhere for children. The entire nation, Gaza, quite simply, Ginny, it's not a place for children right now, but it's home to 1.1 million. But no, if they do something as a child to play, for example, on Sunday when I was at a hospital in Gaza and I saw a little boy who looks like he's got brain damage, he's certainly got terrible burns and shrapnel. He was playing with his friend on the street. The explosion was so severe that the friend's bike was hurled to him at a rate of an explosion and has done catastrophic damage to this little boy. This is what happens if you choose to be a child for a moment in Gaza.
James, you're a spokesperson for UNICEF. You've also been very active on social media trying to get these stories of these people out into the world, particularly the children's stories. Do you feel like the general public opinion is changing? I guess my question is what can people do to help?
What a great question. I think I have to defer to what people on the ground say to me. Palestinians, the man whose wife was killed in a bomb and daughter was killed, lost your wife and your daughter. He's lost his home. He's lost his ability to protect his other children, to feed his other children. His line will be, all I have, James, is hope. So we have to sustain that. And I believe if we have structures of countries of influence, then people have to use that democratic voice rather. They have to let their governments know that they are not willing to be complicit here. They are not willing to be part of humanity closing their eyes to this, that they insist that discussions on this start with empathy and compassion, not just because it's right in principle, but because it's right in practice. Because if we are going to get closer to peace, not further away, not more polarized, more angry, more frustrated. If we're going to get closer to that, then that is through dialogue and compassion. It is certainly not through to the destruction of the Gaza Strip and the killing of many, many more children.
And James, in addition to all of the physical trauma, of course, we've talked about the emotional trauma. We heard earlier from the president of the International Red Cross talking about children with lost limbs having to deal with that and then losing their parents as well. Hundreds of thousands of kids we're talking about. What kind of long-term effect do you think this will have on them if and when this war finally ends?
If and when it ends, well, certainly the recovery can't begin till it does. Gaza is, I look at these kids, and particularly as the fighting started again, those few seconds after the ceasefire broke on whatever day it was, instantly when I was in a hospital, instantly children I'd seen in that hospital day after day, suddenly that moment I'd seen of childhood returning was struck by a fear and anxiety, a little holding their parents that little closer. They know what bombs sound like. Many of them, as you say, 1,000 plus have amputations. They're well aware what the sound of a bomb sounds like. So they cannot begin the recovery at all now. And we know as UNICEF, from Syria to Yemen to Ukraine, the longer a war goes on, the deeper those scars are, the deeper that mental scar is, and the more damage it does to a society that has so many young people that with the right education, and it's a very, very highly literate society, with the right, the right concepts to give them that chance, it becomes the envy of an aging population elsewhere. But right now, it's a nightmare on top of a nightmare for those young people in Gaza.
James, what about the people who are still being held hostage? There are still young people, some children being held as well by Hamas. Do you have any news about their situation, what it's like for those children being held or those who were released?
No, only that from what UNICEF and everyone, I hope, has been saying from day one, release the children, release those hostages, end the torment. I tried to put myself in the shoes of people. It's impossible to do that. Impossible to imagine the torment of those parents. So another reason why both these parties, I'm sorry, but it seems to me the only, having just spent almost 2 weeks in Gaza, it seems to me the only people who want war there are the fighting factions. So get a ceasefire, stop the devastation that we see in South Gaza and across Gaza, and get these Israeli children home to their families and end their torment and let them start to recover.
James, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us from Cairo. You are the spokesperson for UNICEF. Thank you.
Thanks, Genie.